The first mortar round hit 20 meters from Lance Corporal Yemi Adiemo's position, and in the chaos that followed, the convoy left without her. She pressed her body into the mud as the second explosion sent a shower of dirt and shrapnel screaming over her head. Her M40 A5 clutched against her chest like a lifeline. Through the ringing in her ears, she heard engines revving, tires spinning against wet earth, and then the sound she would never forget. The convoy pulling away. 3 Humvees disappearing into the green wall of jungle, while automatic weapons fire crackled from every direction. She screamed for them to stop. She screamed until her throat burned. But the vehicles kept moving, swallowed by the vegetation, their engines fading beneath the relentless crack of AK-47s echoing through the canopy above. Before we continue with the story, drop a comment and let us know what state or country you're watching from. Maybe jungle terrain like this exists where you live, or perhaps you have family who serve in places just like this. Yemi counted the muzzle flashes in the tree line. 17 hostile fighters spread across a 100-meter arc, and every single one of them stood between her and the direction her convoy had fled. She was alone. 1 Marine, 1 rifle, 0 extraction options. The jungle pressed in around her, humid air thick enough to chew, and somewhere in the distance a bird screamed, as if mocking her situation. But the men now advancing through the underbrush did not know who they were hunting. They did not know that Yemi Adeyemo had spent 3 years in places where the jungle itself became a weapon, in deployments that never appeared on official records, in operations that taught her patience was deadlier than any bullet. They were about to learn why the Marines had given her the call sign Ghost. She forced her breathing to slow. Panic killed faster than enemy fire, and she had not survived this long by giving in to fear. The radio on her vest crackled with static, and then a voice cut through. Staff Sergeant Colton's voice, the man who led her team, the man who had looked directly at her position before ordering the convoy to move. All units be advised, he said, his tone flat and professional. We have confirmed casualties at the ambush site. Lance Corporal Adeyemo is Kia. Repeat, Adeyemo is killed in action. Do not attempt recovery. Area is too hot. Yemi's blood turned to ice. She was not dead. She was 30 meters from where that coward had last seen her, very much alive, and he had just told the entire battalion to leave her behind. The realization hit harder than any explosion. This was not chaos. This was not confusion. Colton had seen her. He had made eye contact before the second mortar fell, and he had chosen to report her dead anyway. She thought about the morning before the patrol, when she had shared her MRE with a young Filipino boy who lingered near the FOB perimeter every day. His name was Marco, and he reminded her of Deshawn. Same curious eyes, same shy smile, same way of watching the world like he was trying to figure out where he fit into it. She had learned enough Tagalog to make him laugh, and that laugh had been the best sound she had heard in months. Now she wondered if she would ever hear anything that pure again. The gunfire slowed. The insurgents were regrouping, spreading out to search for survivors. Standard sweep pattern, which meant they were trained, which meant this ambush had not been random. Someone had known the convoy route. Someone had known exactly where to hit them. Yemi filed that thought away for later. Survival first. Questions after. She low-crawled through the mud, every movement calculated, every inch of progress earned through discipline that had been beaten into her at Scout Sniper School and refined in the mountains of Afghanistan. Her instructors had said she was too small for the job, too quiet, too female. She had answered by posting the highest marksmanship scores in her training class and logging a confirmed kill at 847 meters during her first deployment. The men who doubted her learned to stop doubting. The men who hated her learned to hate in silence. And now the men hunting her through this jungle were about to learn the same lesson. She reached a fallen tree thick with moss and vines, positioning herself where the root system created a natural depression in the earth. Good cover, good sight lines. She brought the M40 to her shoulder and pressed her eye to the scope, scanning the tree line with practiced patience. 3 hostiles moving in a cluster 40 meters to her east. 2 more working their way along what remained of the road. The others had spread into the jungle, their movements betrayed by the unnatural sway of vegetation. Yemi's finger rested beside the trigger guard. Not yet. Engaging now would reveal her position, and 17 against 1 required strategy, not bravado. She needed to move, needed to find defensible ground, needed to figure out how a staff sergeant had decided to abandon one of his own Marines in hostile territory. But first she needed to survive the next 5 minutes. A branch snapped somewhere behind her. Close. Too close. She rolled on her back, drawing her sidearm in one fluid motion, the barrel coming up toward the sound. The vegetation parted, and a face emerged from the green. Not an insurgent, a Marine, young, maybe 19, with blood streaming from a gash on his forehead and terror carved into every feature. His uniform was torn and mud-caked, and he was dragging his left leg behind him at an angle that made Yemi's stomach turn. PFC to BS Kisla. She recognized him from the comm station at FOB Resolute. The radio operator who always had a book tucked into his cargo pocket and a nervous habit of tapping his fingers against his thigh. He stared at her now like she was a ghost, which she supposed was fitting. They said you were dead, he whispered, his voice cracking. Colton said on the radio that you were dead. Yemi lowered her weapon slightly, but kept it ready. Colton is wrong, she said. Or lying. Either way, we need to move. Kessler's eyes went wide. My ankle. I think it is broken. I cannot walk. Another burst of gunfire erupted somewhere to the north, and Yemi made a decision that would define everything that followed. She could move fast alone, disappear into the jungle like the ghost they had named her, find her way back to FOB Resolute and expose whatever Colton was hiding. Or she could stay with this terrified young Marine who could not walk, who would slow her down, who would almost certainly get them both killed. She thought of Deshawn. She thought of Marco. She thought of every person she had ever failed to protect. She holstered her sidearm and moved toward Kessler. Put your arm around my shoulder, she said. We are getting out of here together. Somewhere in the jungle behind them, a man shouted orders in Tagalog. The search parties were organizing. The net was closing, and Yemi Adeyemo, the Marine they had left behind, began moving deeper into the green darkness with a wounded soldier on her shoulder and 17 enemies between her and salvation. They moved through the jungle like wounded animals, every step a negotiation between speed and silence. Kessler's arm was draped over Yemi's shoulder, his weight pulling against her with each awkward stride, and she could feel the tremors running through his body. Shock was setting in. She had maybe an hour before he became dead weight, and the insurgents behind them were not going to wait that long. The canopy above filtered the sunlight into scattered beams that cut through the humidity like searchlights, illuminating patches of fern and vine while leaving everything else in shadow. Yemi had memorized the terrain maps before the convoy rolled out, a habit that Colton had mocked as obsessive. Now, that obsession was the only thing keeping them alive. She knew there was a ridge half a kilometer to the northwest, and beyond that ridge, a network of ravines carved by seasonal floods. Difficult terrain, the kind of terrain that swallowed people who did not know how to navigate it. The kind of terrain where a sniper could disappear. Kessler stumbled, and Yemi caught him before he went down. His face had gone pale beneath the blood and grime, and his breathing came in short, sharp gasps. I am slowing you down, he said. You should leave me. Find a place to hide me and come back with help. Yemi adjusted her grip on his vest and kept moving. I'm not leaving anyone behind, she said. Not today. The words tasted like a promise, and she meant them. She had spent too many years carrying the weight of the people she had failed. Deshawn's face still visited her dreams. That last phone call when he had asked her to come home, when he had said things were getting bad in the neighborhood, when she had told him she could not abandon her deployment. 3 weeks later, he was dead, caught in crossfire between rival gangs while walking home from the corner store. She had not been there to protect him. She had chosen duty over family, and that choice had hollowed out something inside her that she was still trying to fill. So no, she was not leaving Tobias Kessler behind. Not for convenience. Not for survival. Not for anything. They reached a shallow stream, cutting through the jungle floor, the water barely ankle-deep but cold enough to shock. Yemi guided Kessler into the current and turned upstream, letting the water mask their trail. Basic evasion, but effective against trackers who relied on footprints and broken vegetation. Behind them, the shouts of the search parties grew fainter, and for the first time since the ambush, Yemi allowed herself to breathe. Kessler spoke through gritted teeth as they waited. "I heard him," he said, "before the mission. Colton." Yemi kept her eyes on the jungle ahead. "Heard him what?" "On a satellite phone. Not the regular comms. His personal sat phone, the one he thinks nobody knows about. He was talking to someone about files. About making sure certain files stay buried." Yemi processed this information without breaking stride. The ambush had felt wrong from the moment the first mortar hit. Too precise, too coordinated. Insurgent groups in this region operated in cells of 5 or 6, not organized units of 17 with military-grade weapons and coordinated fire patterns. Someone had upgraded them. Someone had pointed them at that convoy. "What else did you hear?" she asked. Kessler winced as his shattered ankle caught on a submerged root. He mentioned a name. Wardak. Said something about Wardak needing to stay quiet. Wardak. The word detonated in Yemi's mind like a delayed fuse. She knew that name. Everyone in the battalion knew that name, even if nobody talked about it. Wardak Province, Afghanistan. A patrol that had gone wrong 2 years ago. Friendly fire incident that killed 2 Marines and a civilian journalist embedded with the unit. The official report had blamed equipment malfunction and poor visibility. The unofficial whispers blamed something else entirely. Someone else. The journalist, Yemi said slowly. The one who died in Wardak. What was his name? Kessler shook his head. I do not remember. Some senator's kid, I think. Rich family. Big scandal that got buried fast. Senator Harmon. The name surfaced from Yemi's memory like a corpse rising from deep water. Senator Bradley Harmon, chairman of the Armed Services Committee, whose son had been an aspiring war correspondent, whose son had died in Afghanistan under circumstances that never quite added up, whose political influence could make investigations disappear and careers evaporate. Yemi felt the pieces clicking together, forming a picture she did not want to see. Colton had been in Wardak. She remembered now, a detail from his service record that she had glanced at without interest. He had been there when the senator's son died, and now he was making satellite calls about keeping files buried, and a patrol he led had been ambushed by insurgents who seemed to know exactly where to strike. She did not believe in coincidences. Not anymore. The stream curved around a massive fallen tree, its root system creating a natural shelter against the bank. Yemi guided Kessler into the gap and lowered him onto a bed of decaying leaves. His ankle had swollen to twice its normal size, the joint displaced at an angle that made setting it impossible without proper equipment. She pulled her med kit from her vest and began cutting away his boot. "This is going to hurt," she warned. "Everything already hurts," Kessler replied, attempting a smile that came out as a grimace. "Just do what you have to do." She worked quickly, splinting the ankle with branches and medical tape, immobilizing the joint as best she could. Kessler bit down on his own fist to keep from screaming, tears streaming down his face, but he did not make a sound. Tough kid, tougher than he looked. When she finished, his face was the color of wet cement, but his eyes were clear. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. "You do not even know me." Yemi secured the last strip of tape and sat back on her heels. "Because someone should have done it for my brother," she said, "and because leaving people behind is how the wrong people stay in power." Kessler studied her face for a long moment. "They do not like you," he said. "Colton and the others. They talk about you when you're not around. Say you do not belong in a combat unit. Say you only got your position because of quotas." Yemi felt the familiar anger flare in her chest, the same anger that had driven her through every obstacle the Corps had thrown in her path. "I know what they say," she replied. "I stopped caring about words a long time ago. Results are the only thing that matter, and my results speak for themselves." She pulled the radio from her vest and switched frequencies, scanning for any transmission from FOB Resolute. Static hissed through the speaker, punctuated by fragments of distant chatter. Then Colton's voice cut through, clear and cold. Rescue operations are suspended pending security assessment of the AO. All units return to FOB Resolute. Repeat, all units return to base. The ambush site is compromised. No recovery mission will be launched until threat levels are reassessed. Kessler's eyes went wide. He is leaving us out here. He is actually leaving us to die. Yemi switched off the radio and stared into the green darkness of the jungle. Colton was not just leaving them. He was making sure they never came back. Whatever secret he was protecting, whatever happened in Wardak, it was worth more to him than 2 Marine lives. But Bryce Colton had made a critical miscalculation. He had assumed Yemi Adeyemo would die in this jungle like the convenient casualty he needed her to be. He had forgotten what she was, what she had been trained to become. She checked her rifle, counted her remaining rounds, and began planning their route to the ridge. The ghost was not going to disappear. Not this time. This time, the ghost was going to haunt the man who had tried to bury her. Yemi saw them before they saw her. 8 insurgents moving in a staggered column through the undergrowth, their weapons held at the ready, their eyes scanning the jungle with the focus of men who knew exactly what they were hunting. She pressed herself flat against the ridge and motioned for Kessler to stay down in the depression where she had hidden him. He nodded once, his face tight with pain, and pulled a fallen branch over his body for concealment. She had 23 rounds remaining for the M40. Her sidearm held another 15. Against 8 trained fighters in dense terrain, those numbers meant nothing if she engaged carelessly. Snipers survive by choosing their battles, by controlling the terms of every engagement, by making the enemy fight on ground that favored precision over numbers. The jungle offered her that advantage if she was patient enough to use it. The patrol passed within 40 meters of her position, close enough that she could hear their breathing, close enough that she could see the sweat staining their fatigues. They moved with discipline, maintaining proper intervals, checking their flanks. These were not village militia playing at war. These were fighters who had been trained by someone who understood tactics. The realization tightened something in Yemi's chest. Whoever had organized this ambush had resources, connections, the kind of support that did not come cheap. She let the first 5 pass, waited until the column stretched thin. Then she settled her crosshairs on the man, bringing up the rear, a heavy-set fighter with an RPG strapped across his back. The most dangerous target, the one who could turn a hidden position into a crater with a single well-placed shot. She exhaled slowly, felt her heartbeat steady, and squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked against her shoulder, and the man dropped without a sound. His companion spun toward the noise, weapons rising, but Yemi had already shifted position. She moved through the underbrush like water flowing around stones, relocating 15 meters to the east before the first return fire shredded the vegetation where she had been. 2 more shots, 2 more bodies. The remaining 5 scattered into the jungle, shouting to each other in Tagalog, their discipline crumbling into panic. Yemi did not pursue. She melted back toward Kessler's position, circling wide to avoid any fighters who might have flanked toward the sound of gunfire. The jungle swallowed her movements, branches and vines parting like curtains and closing behind her without a trace. This was what she had been built for. This was the purpose that had been forged into her bones through years of training and combat. The men hunting her thought they were predators. They were about to learn they were prey. She found Kessler exactly where she had left him, his eyes wide, his hand pressed against his mouth to muffle his breathing. "You got 3 of them," he whispered when she slid into the depression beside him. "I heard the shots. 3 shots, 3 down." Yemi checked their perimeter before responding. 5 still out there, she said, plus whatever reinforcements they call in. We need to keep moving. A burst of static erupted from the radio, clipped to her vest, followed by a voice she did not recognize. The voice spoke English with an accent she could not quite place, and the words it spoke made her blood freeze. "American sniper," the voice said, calm and almost amused. "I know you can hear me. My men found the bodies you left behind. Very impressive work. Clean shots, excellent positioning. You have trained well. But I want you to understand something. This jungle belongs to me. Every path, every ridge, every shadow. You are not the hunter here. You are simply a ghost who has not yet realized she is already dead. Kessler stared at the radio like it had transformed into a snake. Who is that? He breathed. The voice continued before Yemi could answer. They call me the Collector. Perhaps you have heard stories. Perhaps not. It does not matter. What matters is this. I am bringing 40 men into this jungle to find you. 40 of my best fighters, armed and eager. You killed 3 of my soldiers today. I respect that. But respect will not save you. Nothing will save you. I'm going to find you, American Sniper, and when I do, I'm going to add your dog tags to my collection. I have 17 American tags already. Yours will make 18. The transmission ended with a click, and the jungle seemed to grow darker around them. Yemi had heard of the Collector. Everyone operating in the southern Philippines had heard of him. A ghost story that commanders used to keep soldiers alert. A boogeyman whose legend had grown with every patrol that vanished without explanation. The insurgent leader who kept trophies from his kills, who had evaded every operation sent to eliminate him, who seemed to know American movements before they happened. 40 men, Kessler said, his voice cracking. How are we supposed to survive against 40 men? Yemi pulled the radio from her vest and turned it off. We survive by being smarter, she said. Faster, more patient. The jungle is not his. The jungle belongs to whoever understands it best. And I have been learning jungles since before the Collector knew how to hold a rifle. She helped Kessler to his feet and adjusted his weight against her shoulder. The ridge was still 300 meters away, and beyond that lay the ravine network that would give them cover and options. Every meter they traveled was a meter closer to survival. Every minute they stayed ahead of the search parties was a minute the Collector could not use against them. But something else gnawed at her as they moved through the undergrowth. The Collector had found them too quickly. The patrol she had engaged had been heading directly toward their position, not searching randomly, but moving with purpose. That meant someone was feeding them information. Someone who knew where she was. The only people who knew her last position were at FOB Resolute. Yemi thought about Colton's satellite phone, thought about the files he wanted buried, thought about how 17 American dog tags had found their way around the Collector's neck. The picture forming in her mind was uglier than anything she had imagined. Colton was not just covering up what happened in Wardak. He was actively working with the enemy, selling patrol routes, positions, intelligence, trading American lives for whatever the Collector was paying him. And now he had sold hers. The rage that surged through Yemi was cold and focused, the kind of anger that sharpened rather than clouded. Colton wanted her dead because she was a loose end, an inconvenient witness who might stumble onto his betrayal. He had reported her killed in action, not out of cowardice, but calculation. A dead Marine asked no questions. A dead Marine filed no reports. A dead Marine could not expose a traitor. But Yemi Adeyemo was not dead. She was wounded, outnumbered, and hunted by a killer who collected dog tags like trophies. She had a broken soldier depending on her, and a jungle full of enemies between her and safety. The odds were impossible. She smiled grimly as she pushed through the vegetation, Kessler groaning with each step. Impossible odds were the only kind she had ever known, and the men who had underestimated her had a habit of regretting it. The Collector wanted her tags. Colton wanted her silence. Neither of them understood what they had awakened. The ghost was done running. Now it was time to hunt. The rain came without warning. A wall of water that crashed through the canopy and transformed the jungle floor into a churning maze of mud and streams. Yemi pulled Kessler beneath an overhang of rock and vines, pressing them both against the stone as the downpour roared around them. The sound was deafening, loud enough to mask their movements, but also loud enough to mask anyone approaching. A blessing and a curse wrapped in the same violent storm. Kessler was shivering despite the tropical heat, his body burning through its reserves as shock and exhaustion took their toll. His eyes had developed a glassy quality that Yemi recognized from too many combat zones. He was fading. Without proper medical care, without warmth and fluids and rest, he would not last another 24 hours. Talk to me, Yemi said, keeping her voice low beneath the thunder of rain. "Stay with me, Kessler. Tell me about home." He blinked slowly, focusing on her face with visible effort. "Home," he repeated, like the word belonged to a language he had forgotten. "There is not much to tell. Small town in Nebraska. Cornfields and churches and not much else. My dad left when I was 6. My mom worked double shifts at the diner to keep us fed. My sister Lily is the smart one. She got a scholarship to study nursing. I joined the Marines because there was nothing else." Yemi adjusted the emergency blanket around his shoulders, trying to trap what little body heat he had left. "Lily sounds like someone worth fighting for," she said. A weak smile crossed Kessler's face. "She's the best person I know. Sends me letters every week, even though I'm terrible at writing back. She wants to work in pediatrics, help sick kids. She would be good at it. She has this way of making people feel safe." The rain began to ease, the roar diminishing to a steady hiss. Yemi checked their surroundings, scanning the gray curtain of water for any sign of movement. The search parties would have taken shelter during the worst of the storm, but they would resume hunting the moment conditions allowed. Every minute of rest was borrowed time. "What about you?" Kessler asked. "You have family waiting somewhere." Yemi was quiet for a long moment. "I had a brother," she finally said. "Deshaun. He was 3 years younger than me. Smartest kid in our neighborhood, always reading, always asking questions. He wanted to be an architect. Used to draw buildings in notebooks, these incredible designs that looked like they belonged in the future." Kessler heard the past tense in her words. "What happened to him?" The rain softened further, and Yemi stared into the gray distance. "I left," she said. "Joined the Marines to get out of Baltimore, to escape the streets that were swallowing everyone I knew. I thought I was being smart, thought I was building a future. But while I was overseas learning to shoot and fight and survive, Deshaun was back home with nobody to protect him. He got caught in crossfire between 2 gangs. Wrong place, wrong time. He was 17 years old." Kessler reached out and touched her arm. "That was not your fault." Yemi shook her head slowly. "I told myself the same thing for years. But the truth is I chose to leave. I chose duty over family. I chose my escape over his safety. And he paid the price for my choices. Every time I look at someone like you, someone young and scared and far from home, I see him. I see the brother I could not save." The rain stopped entirely, leaving the jungle dripping and steaming in the aftermath. Somewhere in the distance, a bird began to sing, its voice strange and beautiful against the silence. Yemi rose to her feet and helped Kessler stand, steadying him as he swayed. "That is why you stayed," Kessler said. "Why you did not leave me behind." "Because of Deshaun." Yemi met his eyes. "Because everyone deserves someone who refuses to give up on them. My brother did not have that. You do." They moved out from the overhang, picking their way through the saturated terrain toward a structure Yemi had spotted through the trees. An abandoned logging shelter, its corrugated roof rusted and sagging, but still intact. Shelter meant rest. Rest meant survival. She guided Kessler through the doorway and lowered him onto a pile of old canvas tarps while she cleared the single room. The shelter had been used recently. That much was immediately clear. Empty MRE wrappers littered one corner, their packaging distinctly American military issue. Boot prints marked the dirt floor, prints made by standard combat footwear. And on a makeshift table constructed from stacked crates, Yemi found something that stopped her cold. A notebook, leather-bound, worn at the edges, filled with handwritten entries in a code she did not recognize. But scattered among the coded passages were words she could read. Coordinates, dates, unit designations, patrol routes. Everything a spy would need to feed information to the enemy. Someone had been meeting insurgents here. Someone American. Yemi photographed each page with her tactical camera, her hands steady despite the fury building in her chest. The dates in the notebook stretched back 18 months. 18 months of betrayal. 18 months of patrols compromised and soldiers killed. The collector's 17 dog tags suddenly had context. They were not random casualties. They were payments for information that should never have left American hands. "Kessler," she said quietly, "I need you to look at something." He limped to her side and stared at the notebook, his face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and finally horror. "Those are our patrol routes," he whispered. "I recognize some of these dates. Third squad got hit on this one. Lost 2 Marines. And this was when Corporal Webb died." Yemi closed the notebook and tucked it into her pack. "This is what Colton wanted buried," she said. "Not just Wardak. All of it. He has been selling us to the collector for over a year." Before Kessler could respond, voices echoed through the jungle outside. Tagalog commands, sharp and urgent. The search parties had found a shelter. Yemi grabbed Kessler and pulled him toward the rear of the structure, where a gap in the wall opened onto dense vegetation. They slipped through just as the first insurgent appeared in the doorway, his weapon sweeping the interior. She heard him shout to his companions, heard boots pounding against the earth, heard the collector's men spreading out to surround the building. She had the evidence now. Proof of Colton's treason. Proof that could expose everything. But proof meant nothing if she died in this jungle with it. They ran. Or rather, Yemi ran while half-carrying Kessler, crashing through the undergrowth as gunfire erupted behind them. Bullets snapped through the leaves, shredding vegetation inches from their heads. She did not return fire. Every round was precious now, and blind shooting would only waste ammunition she could not afford to lose. The ravine appeared suddenly, a slash in the earth that dropped 15 feet to a rocky streambed. No time to find another way. Yemi wrapped her arms around Kessler and jumped. They hit the water hard, the impact driving the breath from both their lungs, but they were alive. They were moving, and somewhere above them, the collector's men had lost the trail. For now, the ravine had saved them and broken them in equal measure. Yemi dragged Kessler onto a shelf of rock above the waterline, her muscles screaming from the impact and the effort of keeping them both from drowning in the current. His splint had shattered during the fall, and his ankle had twisted again, the joint now swollen so severely that the skin had taken on a purple hue that made her stomach turn. He was conscious but barely, his eyes flickering open and closed as fever began its assault. The infection she had feared was setting in, his body burning resources it did not have to fight bacteria that were multiplying with every passing hour. Without antibiotics, without proper treatment, Tobias Kessler had maybe 18 hours. Maybe less. Yemi checked her ammunition. 11 rounds for the M40. 9 for her sidearm. 20 shots between her and 40 hunters who knew these jungles better than she ever could. The math was brutal, the kind of equation that had no good solutions. She could engage 7, maybe 8 targets before running dry. That left over 30 men to finish what their dead companions had started. She slumped against the ravine wall and allowed herself 30 seconds of despair. 30 seconds to feel the weight of everything pressing down on her. The impossible odds. The dying Marine beside her. The traitor who had orchestrated all of this from the safety of an American base. The brother she had failed and the promise she had made to never fail anyone again. Then the 30 seconds ended, and Yemi Adeyemo forced herself to think. The ravine ran roughly northwest, cutting through the jungle toward higher ground. If her mental map was accurate, it would eventually connect with a series of caves that the logging companies had used for storage decades ago. Défensible terrain, concealment options, a place where 20 rounds could last longer than they had any right to. Kessler stirred beside her, his hand reaching out to grip her wrist. "You should go," he said, his voice thin and reedy. "Leave me somewhere hidden. Come back with help. I'm only slowing you down." Yemi looked at his fevered face, at the fear and resignation battling in his eyes. "You told me about Lily," she said, "about how she wants to help sick kids, how she writes you letters every week. You think I'm going to be the one who tells her that her brother died alone in a jungle because I decided he was not worth saving?" Tears leaked from the corners of Kessler's eyes. "I do not want to be the reason you die too." "Then stay alive," Yemi said. "That is an order, private. You stay alive long enough for me to get us out of here." She fashioned a new splint from branches and strips torn from her uniform, working quickly despite her exhausted hands. The jungle around them had grown quiet, the search parties presumably regrouping after losing their trail at the ravine. But quiet never lasted long in hostile territory. The collector would not give up. Men like him never did. As if summoned by her thoughts, his voice crackled through the radio she had forgotten to discard. American sniper, the collector said, his tone almost conversational. My men found blood on the rocks where you jumped. Your companion is wounded. Yes. Badly, I think. You are running out of time and options. I want to offer you something. A trade. Yemi did not respond, but she did not turn off the radio either. Information was ammunition, and she needed every round she could get. Surrender yourself to me. The collector continued. Walk out of that ravine with your hands raised, and I will let the boy live. I have no interest in killing wounded children. I am not a monster. But you, the sniper who killed my men, you I want. Surrender, and your friend sees tomorrow. Refuse, and I will hunt you both until the jungle swallows your bones. Kessler gripped her arm with surprising strength. Do not listen to him, he hissed. He is lying. The collector does not let anyone go. Everyone knows that. Yemi knew it too. The offer was a manipulation, nothing more. A wounded Marine was a liability that the collector would eliminate the moment she was in custody. But the fact that he was making the offer at all told her something useful. He was not certain of her position. His men had lost the trail. He was fishing, hoping desperation would make her careless. She allowed herself a grim smile. The collector thought he was hunting a frightened woman running out of options. He had no idea what he was actually dealing with. But the smile faded as she looked at Kessler's deteriorating condition. Survival required movement, and Kessler could barely stay conscious. She could not carry him through the ravine system fast enough to matter. Every hour she spent supporting his weight was an hour the search parties used to close the net. The thought she had been avoiding forced its way to the surface. She could leave him, find a concealed position, make him comfortable, and move fast and light toward FOB Resolute. Bring back a rescue team with the evidence of Colton's treason. Save herself and expose the conspiracy. It was a smart play, the tactical decision, the choice any rational operator would make. Yemi closed her eyes and saw Deshawn's face. Saw him lying on a Baltimore sidewalk with 3 bullets in his chest while she was 10,000 miles away, learning to be a warrior. She had not been there when he needed her most. She had chosen the mission over the person, and that choice had haunted her every day since. She opened her eyes and looked at Kessler. No, not again. Not ever again. You're going to think I am crazy, she said, but I need you to trust me. Kessler managed a weak laugh that turned into a cough. Lady, you jumped off a cliff holding me. Pretty sure we passed crazy a long time ago. Yemi pulled the notebook from her pack and tore out several pages, the ones with the most damning evidence. She folded them carefully and tucked them into the waterproof pouch on Kessler's vest. If something happens to me, she said, you get these to Captain Osei. Nobody else. Not Colton, not anyone in his chain. Only Osei. Can you do that? Kisla nodded weakly. What are you going to do? Yemi checked her rifle and began scanning the ravine walls for the best climbing route. I'm going to remind the collector why they call me Ghost. She squeezed Kessler's shoulder once, a silent promise, then began her ascent. The collector wanted to hunt her through this jungle. He wanted to add her tags to his collection. He thought he had the advantage of numbers and terrain and time. He was about to learn that ghosts do not run. They haunt, and by dawn, every insurgent in this jungle would know her name. The collector's voice exploded across every frequency at once, broadcasting on channels that only American military equipment could access. What followed changed everything Yemi thought she knew about the situation she was trapped in. Attention all personnel at FOB Resolute, the collector announced, his tone dripping with theatrical satisfaction. I have a story to tell you. A story about one of your own. A man named Bryce Colton. Yemi froze against the ridge where she had been positioning herself, her rifle forgotten as the words poured through her earpiece. For 18 months, the collector continued, Staff Sergeant Colton has been my most valuable asset. He has provided patrol routes, supply schedules, personnel deployments. Every ambush my men have conducted in this region was made possible by information he sold me. Those Marines you mourned at memorial services. Those names carved into walls. They died because Bryce Colton valued money more than their lives. The jungle seemed to hold its breath around her. Yemi could imagine the chaos erupting at FOB Resolute, the disbelief and fury spreading through the ranks as the collector's accusations hit like mortar rounds. But wait, the collector said, his voice turning gleeful. There's more. Ask your staff sergeant about Wardak province. Ask him about the night a senator's son died alongside 2 Marines. The official report blamed equipment failure. The truth is much uglier. Colton was drunk that night, impaired when he ordered the strike that killed his own men. And someone helped him bury the evidence. Someone powerful. Someone who could make investigations disappear. Yemi's mind raced through the implications. The collector was not just hunting her anymore. He was burning Colton, exposing the traitor to his own people. But why? What did he gain from destroying an asset who had served him so well? The answer came with the collector's next words. Colton has become a liability, he explained, as if reading her thoughts. He panicked when his little sniper survived the ambush, made foolish decisions, tried to ensure her death by feeding me her position, not realizing that his desperation would lead me to question his usefulness. A spy who cannot remain calm under pressure is a spy who will eventually be caught. And when he is caught, he might talk about me. So I'm talking first. The broadcast continued, but Yemi's attention snapped to movement on the ridge below. 2 insurgent scouts working their way along the tree line, their heads turning toward the sound of voices. The collector's broadcast had given away her general position to his own men. Whether that was intentional or careless, the result was the same. She had company. She settled into her scope and took the first shot. The lead scout dropped. The second dove for cover, but not fast enough. Her second round caught him the shoulder, spinning him into the open where her third shot finished the job. 3 rounds spent, 8 remaining for the rifle. The broadcast was still playing as she relocated, the collector's voice following her through the jungle like a ghost of her own. At FOB Resolute, Captain Amara Osei had heard enough. Yemi did not know this yet, could not see the scene unfolding 12 kilometers away, but the woman who commanded their company was not the type to let accusations stand unexamined. While other officers gaped at their radios in shock, Osei moved. She found Colton in the communications center, his face the color of ash, his hands trembling as he fumbled with equipment. The broadcast had caught him completely off guard. He had thought the collector was his partner. He had not anticipated betrayal from that direction. Staff Sergeant, Osei said, her voice carrying the calm authority that had earned her respect throughout the battalion. Step away from that equipment. Colton turned to face her, and in his eyes she saw the desperation of a cornered animal. Captain, he started, his voice cracking. This is enemy propaganda. Psychological warfare. You cannot believe anything that terror says. Osei studied him for a long moment. Then explain the notebook, she said. The one recovered from the logging shelter. The one with patrol routes in American handwriting matching your service records. Colton's face went blank. What notebook? Lance Corporal Adeyemo photographed it before she was forced to flee. Transmitted the images during a brief window of satellite coverage 2 hours ago. Our intelligence section has been analyzing them ever since. They match 18 separate incidents over the past year and a half. 18 patrols compromised. 23 Marines killed. The blood drained from Colton's face entirely. He reached for the sidearm on his hip, but Osei was faster. Her weapon cleared the holster before his fingers touched metal. Do not, she said quietly. Colton did not listen. His hand closed around the pistol grip, and in the same motion he grabbed Lieutenant Chun, the young communications officer who had been monitoring the broadcast. The lieutenant gasped as Colton's arm wrapped around his throat, the pistol pressing against his temple. I am walking out of here, Colton said, backing toward the door. Anyone follows me, the lieutenant dies. He was gone before anyone could react, disappearing into the base with a hostage and nothing left to lose. Back in the jungle, Yemi heard the chaos through fragmented radio traffic. Shots fired at FOB Resolute. Colton has escaped custody. All personnel on alert. The situation had spiraled beyond anything she could have predicted. Colton was no longer just a traitor hiding behind his rank. He was a fugitive, a desperate man who knew that his only chance of survival was ensuring that the witnesses against him never made it home. And there was only one witness who mattered. One person who had seen the notebook, photographed the evidence, and could testify to everything Colton had done. Yemi understood what was coming before the collector announced it. Colton was heading into the jungle, not to escape but to hunt, to find her before the rescue teams did, to kill her and destroy the evidence, to eliminate the only person who could guarantee his conviction. She checked her rifle. 8 rounds. Somewhere below, Kessler was hidden in the ravine with 18 hours to live. Somewhere ahead, 40 insurgents were still searching for her under the collector's command. And now, somewhere behind, a traitor in marine combat gear was entering the jungle with murder on his mind. The ghost had become the most wanted woman in the Philippines, hunted by enemies and allies alike. Trapped between a warlord who collected dog tags and a staff sergeant who had already buried his conscience beneath the bodies of his brothers. But Yemi Adeyemo did not feel fear as she processed this information. She felt something else entirely. Clarity, purpose, the clean, cold focus that had carried her through every impossible situation she had ever faced. Colton wanted to find her. The collector wanted to find her. Fine. Let them come. Let them both come. The jungle was about to become a very crowded hunting ground, and only one predator was going to walk out alive. Yemi found Kessler where she had left him, but his condition had deteriorated faster than she had feared. His skin burned with fever. His breathing had become shallow and rapid, and when she pressed her fingers to his wrist, his pulse fluttered like a wounded bird. The infection was winning. Without intervention, he would not survive the night. She knelt beside him and brushed the sweat-soaked hair from his forehead. Kisla, I need you to wake up. His eyes opened slowly, struggling to focus. Ghost, he mumbled. You came back. I told you I would. Listen to me carefully. Things have changed up there. Colton has been exposed. The whole base knows what he did. But he escaped custody, and he is coming into the jungle to find me. To find us. Kessler processed this through the fog of his fever. So we have a traitor and a warlord both hunting us now. Great. Really great. Despite everything, Yemi felt a flicker of admiration for his ability to find dark humor in impossible circumstances. There is more, she said. Captain Osei, receive my transmission. She knows about the notebook. A rescue team is being assembled, but they are at least 20 hours out. We need to survive until then. 20 hours, Kessler repeated weakly. I do not know if I have 20 hours. Yemi gripped his hand and squeezed. You have exactly as many hours as I say you have. That is how this works. I do not leave people behind, and I do not let them quit. Understand? Kessler managed a faint smile. Yes, Corporal. She helped him drink from her canteen, the water warm but clean. As he swallowed, she made her decision. The ravine was no longer safe. Colton knew these jungles from his own patrols, and the collector's men were still systematically searching every grid square. Staying put meant waiting to be found. Moving meant risking Kessler's fragile condition. Both options carried terrible odds. But there was a third option, one that required her to do something she had been avoiding since the ambush began. I have to leave you, she said. Not for long, not to abandon you, but I need to draw them away. Both of them, Colton and the collector. If I can get them focused on chasing me, it buys you time. Buys the rescue team time. Kessler's grip tightened on her hand. You will be alone out there. Against all of them. I have been alone before. It is what I do best. She began preparing him for her absence. Fresh water within reach. His sidearm loaded and positioned where his weakened hands could find it. The pages from the notebook secured in his waterproof pouch. If something happened to her, if she did not return, he would still have the evidence. He would still have a chance. When she finished, Kessler reached up and fumbled with something around his neck. His fingers were clumsy with fever, but he managed to pull a thin chain over his head. A small medallion dangled from it, tarnished silver glinting in the dim light filtering through the jungle canopy. St. Christopher, he said, pressing it into her palm. My grandmother gave it to me when I enlisted. Patron saint of travelers. She said it would protect me far from home. I want you to have it. Yemi looked at the medallion, feeling its weight in her hand. I cannot take this. It is yours, and you are the reason I am still alive to give it away. Take it. Bring it back to me when this is over. Consider it motivation. She slipped the chain over her head and tucked the medallion beneath her uniform. It rested against her chest, cool metal warming slowly against her skin. I will bring it back, she said, and I will bring you home. Both of those things are going to happen. She rose and checked her rifle one final time. 8 rounds, 9 in her sidearm, 17 shots to survive the next 20 hours against enemies who numbered in the dozens. The mathematics of death had never been less forgiving. Kessler caught her wrist before she could leave. Ghost, for what it is worth, you're not what they said you were. Colton and the others. All their talk about quotas and politics. They were wrong. You are the best Marine I have ever served with. The best person I have ever met. Yemi felt something shift in her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the tropical heat. Save your strength, she said. You could tell me all about how great I am when we are back on base drinking terrible coffee. She moved to the edge of the ravine and began her ascent, climbing toward the jungle floor where her hunters waited. The sky above the canopy had begun to darken, the sun descending toward a horizon she could not see. Night was coming. In the darkness, advantages would shift. Thermal scopes and night vision would matter more than numbers. Training would matter more than terrain. And nobody in this jungle had trained harder than Yemi Adeyemo. She reached the top of the ravine and paused, letting her senses expand into the environment around her. The jungle breathed with its own rhythms, insects humming, birds calling, leaves rustling in patterns that revealed movement or concealed stillness. She had learned to read these patterns in places far from home, in forests and mountains and deserts where survival depended on understanding what the earth was telling you. Right now, the earth was telling her that men were moving to the northwest. Heavy footsteps, careless movements, the sounds of searchers who expected to find prey rather than predator. She smiled grimly and began working her way in that direction. Colton wanted to hunt her down before she could testify. The collector wanted her dog tags for his collection. They both imagined they were the dangerous ones in this equation. They were wrong. Yemi Adeyemo was not running anymore. She was not hiding. She was not the frightened woman they expected to find cowering in the jungle waiting for salvation. She was the ghost, and ghosts did not flee from the living. They haunted them. They followed them through the darkness. They waited in the shadows until the moment was right. Then they struck. The first insurgent never saw her coming. She took him silently, her knife finding the gap between his body armor and helmet, and lowered him to the jungle floor without a sound. His radio crackled with chatter as his companions called for updates he would never give. 7 rifle rounds remaining, 8 in the sidearm. 1 Marine against the darkness. The hunt had begun. Yemi watched Colton through her scope from 400 meters away. He moved through the jungle with the confidence of a man who believed he was the hunter, his rifle sweeping the undergrowth as 2 insurgents flanked him on either side. The collector's men, working alongside the trader who had sold their enemies for money. The alliance made a sick kind of sense. Colton needed guides who knew the terrain. The collector needed the one person who could identify where Yemi might hide. Her finger rested beside the trigger guard. 1 shot. She could end Colton right now. Watch him drop into the mud that had swallowed so many of his victims. Justice delivered at 400 meters. The families of 23 dead Marines would never know it was her bullet that avenged their sons and daughters. But the universe would know. The scales would balance. She did not take the shot. Colton alive meant testimony. Colton alive meant names, dates, the identity of whoever had helped him cover up Wardak. Colton alive meant exposing the full conspiracy, not just one guilty man. Dead traitors told no tales, and there were more tales to tell than just his. So she watched, waited, let him pass beneath her position without knowing how close he had come to dying. The 2 insurgents walked on either side of him like bodyguards, their weapons ready, their eyes scanning. They trusted Colton enough to turn their backs on him. That trust would cost them. Yemi repositioned, circling wide through the undergrowth, her movements silent despite the debris carpeting the jungle floor. She had learned to walk without sound in places where a single snapped twig meant death. This jungle was louder than those places, filled with insects and birds and the constant drip of moisture from the canopy above. The noise covered her. The darkness embraced her. She found the insurgent patrol before they found her. 6 men moving in a loose formation, their flashlights cutting erratic paths through the blackness. Undisciplined, overconfident, they expected their prey to be running, not hunting. That expectation would be their final mistake. The first man died without knowing she was there. Her knife opened his throat before his brain could register the shadow that had materialized beside him. The second turned at the wet gurgle of his companion's last breath, but her blade was already moving, punching through the gap beneath his arm and into his heart. 2 down in 3 seconds. 4 remaining. She melted back into the darkness as the survivors began shouting, their flashlights swinging wildly, their weapons firing at shadows. Panic made them loud. Panic made them targets. She circled behind them while they sprayed bullets in an empty jungle, and when the shooting paused for reloads, she struck again. 3, then 4. The 5th ran screaming into the darkness, crashing through vegetation without direction or thought. The 6th tried to call for help on his radio, but her final knife strike silenced him before he could transmit. Yemi stood among the bodies, her breathing controlled, her heart steady. 6 men dead in under 2 minutes. Her knife dripped in the darkness. She had not fired a single shot. This was not who she had wanted to become. She had joined the Marines to escape violence, to find purpose beyond the streets that had claimed her brother. She had trained as a sniper because precision appealed to her, the clean mathematics of distance and wind and trajectory. But war did not care about preferences. War demanded whatever it needed, and tonight it needed a killer who could move through darkness like death itself. She cleaned her blade and continued moving. An hour later, she found Colton again. He had separated from his insurgent escorts, either by choice or by circumstance, and now he crouched alone beside a fallen tree, his rifle clutched against his chest. Even from 50 meters, Yemi could see him shaking. The confident hunter from before had disappeared. In his place was a frightened man who had finally realized he was not alone in this jungle. She could have killed him then, should have killed him, but instead she did something that surprised even herself. She stepped out of the shadows and let him see her. Colton's rifle came up instantly, the barrel tracking toward her chest. Adeyemo, he breathed. You should be dead. Sorry to disappoint. She kept her own weapon lowered, a calculated risk that could end her life in an instant. We need to talk. Talk. He laughed, the sound brittle and unhinged. There is nothing to talk about. You have the notebook. You transmitted the evidence. My career is over. My life is over. What else is there? The truth, Yemi said. Who helped you cover up Wardak? Who made the investigation disappear? You did not do that alone, Colton. Someone with stars on their shoulders protected you. I want to know who. Colton's finger tightened on the trigger. And why would I tell you anything? Because the collector is going to kill you whether you help me or not. You heard his broadcast. You're a liability now. The moment you stop being useful, you become another body in this jungle. Your only chance of surviving the night is if I get you back to FOB Resolute. And the only way that happens is if you give me something worth saving. The standoff stretched through seconds that felt like hours. Yemi watched Colton's eyes, watched the calculations happening behind them. Self-preservation warring with spite. Fear battling hatred. He was a cornered animal, and cornered animals were unpredictable. Then movement in her peripheral vision changed everything. The collector's men emerged from the jungle behind Colton. 5 of them, weapons raised, spreading into a semicircle that trapped both Americans in a kill zone. Colton spun toward them, his rifle swinging away from Yemi, and in that moment of chaos, she made her choice. She raised her M40 and fired. Once, twice, 3 times. 3 insurgents dropped before the others could react. Colton stood frozen, unable to process that the woman he had tried to kill had just saved his life. The remaining two fighters returned fire, but Yemi was already moving, tackling Colton behind the fallen tree as bullets shredded the air above their heads. 4 rounds remaining. She pressed her back against the rotting wood and looked at the man beside her. The traitor who had sold her to the enemy. The coward who had left her to die. The murderer whose greed had cost 23 Marines their lives. "Congratulations," she said flatly. "You're now my prisoner. When we get out of this, you're going to tell Captain Osei everything. Names, dates, bank accounts, all of it. And then you're going to spend the rest of your miserable life in Leavenworth." "Understood." Colton stared at her with something that might have been shock or might have been the beginning of broken surrender. "Why?" he whispered. "Why save me? After everything I did." Yemi checked her rifle and prepared to engage the remaining insurgents. "Because dead men cannot testify," she said. "And because leaving people behind is what you do. Not me. Never me." The jungle erupted with gunfire as the collector's reinforcements arrived. Bullets tore through the fallen tree, spraying rotted wood and debris across Yemi's back as she pressed Colton flat against the jungle floor. The collector's reinforcements had arrived in force, at least a dozen fighters spreading through the undergrowth, their muzzle flashes strobing through the darkness like angry fireflies. For rifle rounds, 9 in the sidearm, 13 shots against 12 or more enemies who had them pinned and outgunned. She grabbed Colton by his vest and hauled him deeper into the depression behind their cover. "Stay down and stay quiet," she hissed. "Move when I move. Stop when I stop. Deviate from that, and I leave you for them." Colton nodded frantically, his earlier arrogance stripped away by the reality of combat. He was a desk warrior who had bought his way through danger by selling others. Now that the danger had found him personally, he had nothing left but fear. Yemi calculated angles and distances in the span of 2 heartbeats. The insurgents were approaching from the east, using the terrain to funnel toward their position. Standard assault formation, which meant they expected resistance, but not counterattack. They thought they had trapped wounded prey. They were wrong. She rose from cover just long enough to place 2 shots. Both found their marks. 10 enemies remaining. 2 rifle rounds left. Return fire intensified, forcing her back down as the tree disintegrated around her. She could not stay here. Another 30 seconds, and they would be flanked. Another minute, and the crossfire would make survival impossible. There, 20 meters to the west, a shallow ravine cut through the jungle floor. Not deep enough for true cover, but enough to break line of sight. Enough to create options. She grabbed Colton and ran. Bullets snapped past her ears as they sprinted through the undergrowth, branches whipping against her face, roots threatening to trip her with every stride. Colton stumbled twice, and both times she dragged him forward without slowing. The ravine appeared in the darkness, and she threw herself into it, pulling the traitor down beside her as automatic fire shredded the vegetation above their heads. They crawled through mud and standing water, the ravine twisting deeper into the jungle. Behind them, shouts echoed as the insurgents realized their prey had escaped the kill zone. Flashlight beams cut through the canopy, searching, probing. Yemi kept moving, putting distance between them and their pursuers, letting the jungle swallow their trail. 5 minutes. 10. The sounds of pursuit faded into the general chorus of the night jungle. They had bought themselves time. Not much, but enough to breathe. Colton collapsed against the ravine wall, gasping for air. His face had gone gray, and his hands trembled so badly he could barely grip his rifle. "You saved me," he said between ragged breaths. "Again, why do you keep saving me?" Yemi checked their surroundings before answering. "I told you, dead men cannot testify. That is not the whole truth. Nobody risks their life this many times for testimony. What is the real reason?" She considered lying, considered deflecting, but something about the darkness and the danger stripped away the pretense. "My brother died because I was not there to protect him," she said. "I made a choice to serve my country instead of staying home where he needed me. That choice cost him everything. I swore I would never make it again. Never leave someone behind, no matter who they are or what they have done. Colton was quiet for a long moment. I had a brother too, he finally said. Kevin. He died in Wardak. He was one of the 2 Marines killed that night. Yemi felt the words hit her like a physical blow. Your own brother. Colton's voice cracked. It was an accident. I was drinking to cope with the stress. Just a few shots to take the edge off before the patrol. I did not think it would affect my judgment. But when we made contact, I panicked. Called in coordinates wrong. The strike hit our own position instead of the enemy. Kevin was standing right next to me when it happened. Tears streamed down his face, cutting tracks through the grime and mud. The senator's son saw everything. He was going to report it, going to tell the world that I killed my own brother through negligence. So when the extraction came, I made sure he did not make it back. You murdered him, Yemi said flatly. I covered up my mistake. Colton's voice had gone hollow, empty of everything except exhaustion. General Whitmore helped. He owed favors to the senator's political opponents, made the investigation disappear in exchange for me, keeping my mouth shut about some things I'd seen him do overseas. One cover-up led to another. Then the collector found out what I had done and offered me money to keep doing it. Every patrol I compromised, every Marine who died, I told myself it was necessary. Told myself I had no choice. You always had a choice, Yemi said. You just kept choosing wrong. The sound of approaching footsteps cut off any response. Close. Too close. Yemi raised her rifle and sighted down the ravine, her last 2 rounds ready to fire at whatever emerged from the darkness. A figure appeared, not an insurgent, a man in American combat gear, moving with the easy confidence of someone who owned every shadow he passed through. He stopped 20 meters away and smiled, his teeth white against the darkness of his face. The ghost herself, he said. I wondered when we would meet properly. I am the collector, and I must say, you have impressed me tonight. 11 of my men dead by your hand. Perhaps more. You are everything the stories claimed and more. Yemi kept her rifle trained on his chest. One more step, and I add you to the count. The collector spread his hands in a gesture of mock surrender. Such hostility. And here I came to make you an offer. I know where your young friend is hiding. The wounded one. Kessler, yes. My men found his position an hour ago. They are waiting for my command to move in. The blood froze in Yemi's veins. Surrender yourself to me now. The collector continued, and I will let him live. I will even let Colton go, worthless as he is. All I want is you, your skills, your reputation. Imagine what we could accomplish together, Ghost. The things I could teach you, the power we could claim. Behind her, Colton shifted. Do it, he whispered. Save Kessler. I will turn myself in, testify to everything. Just save the kid. Yemi stared at the collector through her scope. 547 meters was her longest confirmed kill. This shot was barely 20. She could not miss at this range. But if she killed him, his men would execute Kessler before she could reach the ravine. She lowered her rifle. The collector smiled. Wise choice. Now, step forward slowly, and we can discuss the terms of your new employment. Yemi took one step, then another. The St. Christopher medal pressed against her chest, warm from her body heat. She thought of Kessler giving it to her, his fevered hands trembling. She thought of Deshawn, dying alone on a Baltimore street. She thought of every promise she had ever made and every one she had ever broken. Then she heard the helicopters. The sound cut through the jungle like thunder, rotors beating the air into submission as searchlights lanced down through the canopy. American helicopters, Marine markings visible in the strobing light. The rescue team had arrived 12 hours early. The collector's smile vanished. His hand moved toward his weapon, but Yemi was faster. Her rifle came up in one fluid motion, and she took the shot. The bullet caught him in the shoulder, spinning him backward, his weapon flying from his grip. Not a kill shot. Deliberate. She needed him alive, just like she needed Colton alive. Testimony. Evidence. Justice delivered through the system rather than through the scope. She charged forward before he could recover, closing the distance in seconds. Her boot connected with his jaw as he tried to rise, and he went down hard, blood streaming from his mouth. She planted her knee on his chest and pressed the barrel of her sidearm against his forehead. "Your collection ends tonight," she said. Above them, Marines fast-roped through the canopy, their weapons sweeping the jungle as they secured the perimeter. Yemi heard shouting, orders being given, the organized chaos of a combat rescue operation. Someone was calling her name. She did not move from the collector's chest until hands she recognized pulled her away. Captain Osei's face appeared above her, illuminated by the helicopter's searchlights, her expression caught between relief and amazement. "Lance Corporal Ademo," the captain said, "you have a lot of explaining to do." Yemi looked at Colton, now surrounded by Marines with weapons drawn. Looked at the collector, being zip-tied by operators who had heard his broadcast and wanted very much to show him what they thought of men who collected American dog tags. "Kessler," she said, "the ravine. He needs medical attention now." "Already en route?" Osei replied. "We tracked his position from his emergency beacon. He activated it 2 hours ago. That's how we found you so quickly." The beacon. Yemi had shown him how to use it before she left. A contingency in case everything went wrong. He had waited until the last possible moment, trusting her to handle things until she could not anymore. "That kid," she said quietly. "That stupid brave kid." She let the exhaustion take her then. Let her body finally acknowledge the toll of the past 36 hours. Marines swarmed around her, medics checking her wounds, officers demanding reports. But all Yemi could think about was a St. Christopher medal pressed against her heart and the promise she had made to return it. The ghost had survived, and she was bringing everyone home. The medical evacuation helicopter touched down at FOB Resolute as the first light of dawn broke over the jungle canopy. Yemi refused treatment until she saw Kessler carried past on a stretcher, his face pale, but his eyes open, his hand reaching toward her as the medics rushed him toward the field hospital. She caught his fingers for just a moment, felt the weak squeeze of his grip, and then he was gone through the doors and into the hands of surgeons who would fight to save his leg. She stood in the landing zone and watched the doors swing closed behind him. 37 hours. That was how long she had kept him alive in that jungle. 37 hours of carrying him, hiding him, fighting for him against impossible odds. Now his survival was in someone else's hands, and the helplessness of that reality hit her harder than any bullet ever had. Captain Osei appeared at her shoulder. "He's going to make it," she said. "The surgeons are optimistic. The infection had not spread as far as they feared. Another few hours and it would have been different, but you bought him exactly enough time." Yemi nodded without speaking. Her voice had abandoned her somewhere between the jungle and this moment, lost in the exhaustion that pressed down on her like a physical weight. "Come with me," Osei said. "There are people who need to hear what happened out there, and there are things you need to see." They walked through the FOB in silence, passing clusters of Marines who stopped and stared as Yemi moved by. Word had spread. The story of the sniper who had been left for dead, who had survived alone against 40 insurgents, who had captured both a traitor and a warlord, had raced through the base like wildfire. She felt their eyes on her, but could not meet them. Heroes were supposed to feel triumphant. She just felt empty. The command center was crowded with officers and intelligence personnel, all of them focused on screens, displaying information that made Yemi's breath catch in her throat. Photographs from a notebook she had found in the logging shelter. Bank records traced through a dozen shell companies. Communications intercepts linking Colton to the collector spanning 18 months of betrayal. And one face she did not recognize. A man in army dress uniform, 3 stars gleaming on his shoulders, his expression frozen in an official portrait that radiated authority and power. "Lieutenant General Marcus Whitmore," Osei said quietly. "Colton gave him up an hour ago. Confirmed everything." Whitmore covered up Wardak in exchange for Colton's silence about certain activities during their shared deployment to Afghanistan. Activities involving diverted funds and unauthorized operations. When Colton started working with the collector, Whitmore looked the other way because exposing the arrangement would have exposed his own crimes. Yemi stared at the face on the screen. A 3-star general. one of the most powerful men in the entire military structure, and he had let Marines die to protect his secrets. He is being detained as we speak, Osei continued. The Secretary of Defense was briefed 2 hours ago. This is going to be the biggest scandal the Corps has seen in decades. Careers will end. People will go to prison. And it all started because you refused to die when Colton needed you to. The weight of those words settled over Yemi like a shroud. 23 Marines. 23 families who had buried sons and daughters and brothers and sisters who had been told their loved ones died serving their country. They had died serving Colton's greed and Whitmore's ambition. They had died because men with power had decided their lives were acceptable losses. She thought of Deshawn, thought of all the people who died because someone with the power to protect them chose not to. The rage that rose in her chest was cold and vast, an ocean of fury that threatened to drown everything else. The collector, she said, her voice emerging rough and raw. What happens to him? Osei's expression hardened. Intelligence is very interested in his network. He has information about insurgent operations across the entire region. In exchange for cooperation, he might avoid execution, might spend the rest of his life in a black site somewhere instead. Yemi thought about the 17 dog tags around his neck. 17 Americans whose final moments had been spent in his custody. She wondered if their families would ever know the truth about how they died. She wondered if knowing would help or just deepen the wound. A commotion at the door drew her attention. Marines parted to let someone through, and then Kessler was there, sitting in a wheelchair pushed by a medic who looked deeply unhappy about his patient's refusal to stay in bed. His leg was wrapped in heavy bandages. His face was still pale, but his eyes were bright and fixed on Yemi with an intensity that made her chest tighten. They told me not to move, he said. I told them I needed to see you. We compromised. The medic behind him rolled her eyes. He threatened to crawl if we did not bring the chair. Stubborn does not begin to cover it. Yemi crossed the room and knelt beside the wheelchair, bringing herself to his eye level. You activated the beacon, she said. You saved all of us. Kessler shook his head. You saved me first. Multiple times. I just pushed a button. He reached into the pocket of his hospital gown and pulled out something that glinted in the fluorescent light. The pages you gave me. The evidence. I kept them safe, just like you asked. Figured you might want them back. Yemi took the folded papers, feeling their weight in her hand. These pages had cost lives to obtain. They had nearly cost hers. Now they would end careers and send powerful men to prison and maybe, just maybe, bring some measure of justice to 23 families who deserve to know the truth. She reached up and pulled the chain from around her neck. The St. Christopher medal dangled from her fingers, tarnished silver, catching the light. I believe this belongs to you, she said. Told you I would bring it back. Kessler took the medal and held it in his palm, staring at it like it was something precious. My grandmother said it would protect me far from home. She was right. It just took a detour through you first. Yemi stood and placed her hand on his shoulder. You're going to be fine, private. The surgeon said you might lose some mobility in that ankle, but you will walk again. You will serve again if you want to. Kessler looked up at her with eyes that held no trace of the terrified boy she had found in the jungle 37 hours ago. He had aged years in less than 2 days. Combat did that to people. Survival did that to people. He said. I want to serve with Marines like you. People who do not leave anyone behind, no matter what. Captain Osei stepped forward, her expression carrying something Yemi could not quite read. Speaking of service, she said, Lance Corporal Adeyemo, there are going to be a lot of conversations in the coming days. Debriefs, investigations, probably a lot of politicians want to shake your hand for the cameras. But before all that, I wanted you to know something. She reached into her pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. I put in the paperwork this morning. It will take time to process, but given the circumstances, I expect approval within the week. Yemi opened the box. Inside, a bronze star with a V device for valor rested against dark fabric. The metal caught the light, its surface gleaming with the promise of recognition she had never sought but had undeniably earned. She closed the box and looked at Captain Osei. I did not do this for medals, she said. I know, Osei replied. That is exactly why you deserve one. Around them, the command center had fallen silent. Marines and officers alike watched the exchange, witnesses to a moment that would become legend in the battalion. The ghost. The sniper who would not die. The woman who brought down a general and captured a warlord and carried a wounded Marine through hell because leaving him behind was never an option. Yemi tucked the box into her pocket and turned back to Kessler. "Come on," she said. "Let us get you back to the hospital before that medic has an aneurysm." As she pushed his wheelchair toward the door, Kessler spoke quietly. "Ghost, what happens now? After all the debriefs and investigations and medals, what do you do next?" Yemi thought about the question as they moved through corridors filled with Marines who stepped aside with respect bordering on reverence. She thought about Deshawn and the guilt she would carry forever. She thought about the jungle and the things she had done in the darkness. She thought about the person she had become and the person she still wanted to be. "I keep going," she said finally. "I keep serving. I keep making sure nobody else gets left behind. That is what happens now. That is what happens always." The sun had risen fully by the time they reached the hospital, golden light spilling across FOB Resolute like a promise of something better. Yemi stood in that light and let it warm her face, let it chase away some of the shadows that had taken root in her soul. She had survived. They had survived. And somewhere in the wreckage of the past 37 hours, she had found something she thought she had lost forever. Purpose. Belonging. The knowledge that she was exactly where she was supposed to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do. The ghost was home. 2 weeks later, Yemi stood in the base chapel at Camp Pendleton, California, wearing her dress blue for the first time since boot camp graduation. The metal pin to her chest felt heavier than its actual weight, a constant reminder of everything that had happened in the Philippine jungle and everything that had followed. The ceremony had drawn hundreds of attendees. Marines from her battalion, officers from commands she had never heard of. Journalists kept carefully corralled behind velvet ropes. Family members of the 23 fallen, invited to witness justice finally being acknowledged for their loved ones. The chapel could not hold them all, so speakers had been set up outside for the overflow crowd that spilled across the manicured grounds. Captain Osei delivered the citation in a voice that carried to every corner of the room. For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action against the enemy while serving as scout sniper, 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines. Lance Corporal Adiemo distinguished herself by extraordinary heroism during combat operations in Mindanao Province, Republic of the Philippines. Yemi kept her eyes fixed on a point above the crowd, the way she had been trained. Do not look at individuals. Do not let emotion crack the bearing expected of a Marine in formation. But her gaze kept drifting to faces she recognized. Kessler sat in the front row, his legs still in a medical boot, but his posture ramrod straight. He had insisted on attending despite his doctor's reservations, had argued and pleaded, and finally threatened to check himself out against medical advice. In the end, they had compromised. He could attend if he used a wheelchair. He had agreed, then stood the moment the ceremony began and remained standing through the entire proceedings. Beside him sat a young woman with his same sandy hair and earnest eyes. Lily. She had flown in from Nebraska the moment she learned her brother was safe, had spent every day since at his bedside, had wept when Yemi visited and thanked her with words that seemed inadequate for the magnitude of what had happened. "You gave me my brother back," Lily had said. "I do not know how to thank someone for that." Osei continued reading. Where her convoy was ambushed and she was presumed killed in action, Lance Corporal Adiemo evaded capture and engaged hostile forces while simultaneously providing medical care to a wounded Marine. Over the course of 37 hours, she single-handedly neutralized 17 enemy combatants, gathered critical intelligence, exposing a treasonous conspiracy within American military leadership, and facilitated the capture of a high-value insurgent target. The words sounded clinical, sterile. They could not capture the mud and blood and terror. They could not convey the weight of Kessler's body against her shoulder or the sound of the collector's voice promising death over the radio. They cannot explain what it felt like to kill men in the darkness with nothing but a knife and the desperate need to survive. But that was how the military processed heroism. Reduce it to facts and figures. Pin a medal on it and file the paperwork. Move on to the next crisis, the next war, the next young person asked to carry burdens that would crush most civilians. Her actions reflect great credit upon herself and are in keeping with the highest traditions of the Marine Corps and the United States Naval Service. Applause erupted as the commandant of the Marine Corps stepped forward to pin the medal to her chest. Cameras flashed. The crowd rose to their feet. Yemi stood at attention and accepted the recognition with the bearing expected of her, even as her mind wandered to places the audience could not follow. She thought about Colton, currently awaiting court-martial at the Naval Consolidated Brig in Charleston. He had pleaded guilty to all charges in exchange for life imprisonment instead of execution. His testimony had already resulted in 6 additional arrests, including General Whitmore, who had been stripped of his rank and faced his own trial in the coming months. She thought about the collector, whose real name turned out to be Ramon Villanueva, a former Philippine Army officer who had deserted 15 years ago and built his insurgent network from nothing. Intelligence had extracted everything useful from him within the first week. He would spend the rest of his life in a facility that did not officially exist. His collection of dog tags returned to the families of the fallen. She thought about Deshawn, about the brother she had lost while chasing a future that seemed impossibly distant now. She wondered what he would think if he could see her standing here, decorated for valor, celebrated as a hero. She hoped he would be proud. She hoped he would understand that everything she had done in that jungle, every life she had taken and every life she had saved, had been for him, had been because of him. The ceremony ended with handshakes and photographs and more words than Yemi could process. She smiled when expected and spoke when required and endured the attention with as much grace as she could muster. But when the crowds finally thinned and the journalists packed their cameras, she slipped away to find the one person whose opinion actually mattered. Kessler was waiting outside the chapel, leaning against his wheelchair with his sister hovering nearby. He had refused to sit back down despite the obvious pain in his leg, his stubbornness apparently a family trait based on the exasperated look on Lily's face. "That was quite a speech," he said as Yemi approached. "Did you know they were going to say all that stuff?" Yemi shook her head. "They did not exactly send you a draft for approval." Lily stepped forward and wrapped Yemi in a hug before she could react. "Thank you," she whispered against Yemi's shoulder. "Thank you for bringing him home." The embrace lasted longer than Yemi expected, and when Lily finally released her, there were tears on both their faces. Yemi wiped her eyes quickly, embarrassed by the display of emotion, but neither Kessler's sibling seemed to judge her for it. "What happens now?" Kessler asked. "For you, I mean. Do you go back to the battalion? Back to deployments?" Yemi reached into her pocket and withdrew a folded letter she had received that morning. "Actually," she said, "I have been given a choice. The Corps is forming a new training program. Female combat operators for specialized missions. They want instructors who have proven themselves in the field. People who can teach what cannot be learned from books." Kessler's eyes widened. "They want you to train the next generation of women like you." Something like that. Yemi unfolded the letter and stared at the words she had already memorized. It would mean leaving the battalion, leaving deployment rotations, trading the rifle for a classroom, at least part of the time. "And what did you decide?" Lily asked. Yemi thought about the jungle, about the darkness and the blood and the weight of lives taken and saved. She thought about the young women who would follow in her footsteps, who would face the same doubts and dismissals and impossible odds she had overcome. She thought about what it would mean to shape them, to give them the tools she had forged through fire and loss. "I decided that the best way to make sure nobody gets left behind is to train people who understand what that really means," she said. "People who have been tested. People who know the cost." Kessler grinned, the expression transforming his face from wounded survivor to the eager young Marine she had first encountered in the jungle. "Then I guess I know where I am requesting assignment when I finish rehabilitation." Yemi raised an eyebrow. "You want to train with me?" "I want to serve with people who do not give up," he said. People who keep their promises. You show me what that looks like. Now I want to show others. Lily laughed and shook her head. You, Adeyemo, have created a monster, she said. He has not stopped talking about rejoining active duty since he woke up from surgery. Good, Yemi said. The Corps needs more monsters like him. She looked at the medal on her chest, then at the siblings standing before her, then at the California sky stretching blue and endless above them all. The weight she had carried since Deshawn's death had not disappeared. It would never disappear entirely. But somewhere between the jungle and this moment, it had transformed into something she could bear. Purpose. Legacy. The knowledge that her survival meant something beyond her own continued existence. The ghost had a new mission now, and she was just getting started. 6 months later, Corporal Yemi Adeyemo stood at the edge of the rifle range at Marine Corps Base Quantico, watching 12 young women take their positions on the firing line. The morning sun cast long shadows across the grass, and the air carried the crisp bite of a Virginia autumn. Behind her, the hills rolled green and gold toward a horizon she had once thought she would never see again. The promotion had come through 3 months after the ceremony at Camp Pendleton. Captain Osei had personally pinned on the new chevrons, her expression carrying a pride that words could not adequately convey. You earned this, Osei had said. Now earn it again every single day. Yemi intended to do exactly that. The women on the firing line came from every background imaginable. A former college athlete from Texas who had joined the Corps to prove she could handle anything. A quiet engineer from Massachusetts who had discovered a gift for precision that surprised everyone, including herself. A single mother from Georgia who had enlisted to build a better life for her daughter. 12 different stories, 12 different reasons for being here, united by a single purpose. They wanted to become what Yemi had become. They wanted to prove that gender was irrelevant when it came to combat effectiveness. They wanted to serve their country in ways that previous generations of women had been denied. And Yemi was going to make sure they were ready. Settle your breathing, she called out, walking the line behind them. Your rifle is an extension of your body. Your scope is an extension of your eye. When you pull that trigger, there should be no separation between intention and action. You and the weapon are one system working toward one purpose. She paused behind a young lance corporal named Daria Okonkwo, watching the slight tremor in her shoulders. Okonkwo had the talent, but not yet the confidence. She second-guessed herself at critical moments, let doubt creep in when certainty was required. It was a problem Yemi recognized intimately because she had once suffered from the same affliction. Okonkwo, she said quietly, what are you thinking about right now? The lance corporal's jaw tightened. Whether I'm going to miss, Corporal. Wrong answer. Yemi knelt beside her, bringing her voice low enough that only Okonkwo could hear. You are thinking about failure before you have even attempted success. That is backwards. When you look through that scope, the only thing that exists is the target and your ability to hit it. Everything else is noise. Doubt is noise. Fear is noise. The opinions of people who said you did not belong here are noise. Silence all of it. Find the stillness. Then shoot. Okonkwo took a deep breath and resettled her position. The tremor in her shoulders faded. Her finger moved to the trigger with newfound steadiness. The shot rang out across the range. Dead center. Yemi allowed herself a small smile as she rose and continued down the line. That was the job now. Finding the potential in others and helping them realize it. Taking the lessons written in blood and jungle mud and transforming them into knowledge that could save lives. A familiar sound drew her attention to the observation platform at the edge of the range. The mechanical whir of a prosthetic leg, followed by footsteps that had grown steadier with each passing month. She turned to find Kessler approaching, his gait almost normal now, the slight hitch in his stride barely noticeable unless you knew to look for it. He had made good on his promise. Rehabilitation had been brutal, months of physical therapy and setbacks and small victories that accumulated into something remarkable. The doctors had said he would never run again. He had proven them wrong within 4 months. They had said combat duty was out of the question. He had filed the waiver requests anyway and been approved 2 weeks ago. Now he served as the communications and intelligence specialist for Yemi's training unit. His experience in the Philippine jungle lending credibility that no classroom instruction could match. When the trainees needed to understand what combat really felt like, what it meant to be hunted and afraid and determined to survive anyway, Kessler told them stories that left no room for romanticism. "Looking good out there," he said, nodding toward the firing line. Okonkwo finally found her center. She just needed someone to remind her it was there. Yemi fell in a step beside him as they walked toward the unit headquarters. "How are the logistics for the field exercise?" "Squared away. We deploy to the training area at 0500 tomorrow. 3 days of simulated combat operations, just like you designed." The trainees are nervous. Good. Nervous means they understand the stakes. Comfortable gets people killed. They walked in companionable silence for a moment, the sounds of the rifle range fading behind them. 6 months of working together had built something between them that defied easy categorization. Not quite friendship, though that was part of it. Not quite the bond between survivors, though that was part of it too. Something deeper. Something forged in circumstances that most people would never understand. Kessler spoke first. "I got a letter from Lily yesterday. She finished her nursing certification. Starts at the Children's Hospital in Omaha next month." Yemi smiled. "She's going to be amazing at it. She wants you to visit. Says she will not take no for an answer. Apparently, she has decided you are part of the family now, and family does not skip holiday dinners." The words hit Yemi harder than she expected. Family. She had not had family since Deshawn died. Had not allowed herself to even consider the possibility that she might find it again. But Kessler and Lily had somehow slipped past the wall she had built, had planted themselves in her life with a stubbornness that matched her own. "Tell her I will be there," she said. "Thanksgiving, right?" "Kisla klingt." "She is already planning the menu. Warn me that you are not allowed to bring anything, because apparently Marines cannot cook. That is a vicious stereotype." Yemi paused. Also completely accurate in my case. They reached the headquarters building and paused at the entrance. Through the windows, Yemi could see her office, the desk covered in training schedules and performance evaluations, and all the paperwork that came with shaping the next generation of warriors. On the wall behind the desk hung a single framed photograph. The image showed a young man in civilian clothes, his smile bright and unguarded, his eyes full of dreams he would never get to chase. Deshawn Adeyemo, age 17, 3 weeks before his death. Yemi had placed it there on her first day, a reminder of why she did what she did. A promise renewed every morning when she walked through that door. Kessler followed her gaze to the photograph. "You still think about him?" "Every day." Yemi's voice carried no sadness, only quiet certainty. "But it is different now. For a long time, I thought about what I lost, why I failed to protect. Now I think about what he would want me to do, how he would want me to live. And I think he would want this. He would want me to take everything I learned and use it to make sure other people's brothers and sisters come home." She turned to face Kessler directly. "That is what you helped me understand. In that jungle, when I refused to leave you behind, I thought I was honoring his memory by not repeating my mistake. But it was more than that. I was finally becoming the person he always believed I could be. Someone who protects. Someone who leads. Someone who refuses to accept that anything is impossible." Kessler held her gaze for a long moment. Then he reached into his pocket and withdrew something small and metallic. The St. Christopher medal caught the autumn sunlight, its tarnished surface warm with history. "I want you to have this," he said. "Permanently this time. You gave it back after the jungle, but it belongs with you. My grandmother said it protects travelers far from home. But you taught me that home is not a place. Home is the people who refuse to give up on you. And wherever you go, whatever missions you take on, I want you to carry a piece of that with you." Yemi took the medal and held it in her palm, feeling its familiar weight. She thought about the ravine and the fever and the promise she had made to return it. She thought about the family she had lost and the family she had found. She slipped the chain over her head and let the medal rest against her heart. "Thank you," she said, "for everything." The rifle range erupted with another volley of shots, 12 women learning to become something the world had told them they could not be. Somewhere out there, new threats were gathering, new challenges waiting for warriors brave enough to face them. And here at Quantico, in a shadow of hills that had witnessed generations of Marines preparing for battle, Corporal Yemi Adeyemo was making sure those warriors would be ready. The ghost had found her purpose, not in the jungle where she had been abandoned, not in the darkness where she had learned to kill, but here, in the light, surrounded by the women, she was training to carry on a legacy of courage and determination that would outlast them all. She was no longer the Marine they had left behind. She was the Marine who made certain that no one would ever be left behind again. If this story moved you, drop a comment and share your favorite moment or character. Maybe you connected with Yemi's determination, or Kessler's courage, or the bond they built in impossible circumstances. Or perhaps you know someone who showed hidden strength when everyone else had given up on them. We would love to hear your story.